Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to session 2 of the Federal TRIO Program Subcommittee. My name is Crystal Smith. I am a commissioner at FMCS. I will be facilitating our committee meeting today, along with my co-facilitator, Cindy Jeffries, also with FMCS. To begin, I would like to start with the roll call for our subcommittee members. Good morning and welcome back. I will begin with our non-federal subcommittee members, beginning with the current or former participants in a federal TRIO program representative, Wade Williams.
Here.
Good morning, Wade.
Good morning.
And representing our institutions of higher education, D'Angelo Sands.
Here.
Good morning, D'Angelo. Representing our public or private agencies or organizations, including community-based organizations with experience in serving disadvantaged. Emmeline Lapis.
Here.
Good morning, Emmeline. Representing secondary schools, including local educational agencies with secondary schools, Jeff Garner.
Here. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Jeff. And I don't know. Michael is not here yet, but for our state officials, including state higher education executive officers, state authorizing agencies, and state regulators of institutions of higher education, that representative is Michael Miotti, and he is not yet here. For the Department of Education, our subcommittee leader is Aaron Washington. Good morning, Aaron.
Good morning.
And assisting Aaron today, we have Hannah Hodel from the Office of General Counsel.
Good morning.
Good morning, Hannah, along with Vanessa Gomez.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Vanessa, and Gaby Watts.
Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. As we know, this is the second and final subcommittee meeting. And we do have our issue paper before us. To help us guide us through the discussion, I will turn it over to our lead subcommittee member, Aaron Washington. Aaron.
Thank you, Crystal. So welcome back, everybody. For those tuning in for the first time, my name is Aaron Washington again, and I'll be the subcommittee team lead. So welcome to day 2, the final day of our subcommittee. At the previous subcommittee sessions, we provided a super high-level overview of rulemaking, the purpose of the subcommittee, and we took a deep dive into the issue paper and had really great discussions. We won't go back through it all today, so if anybody watching for the first time really is interested in seeing what transpired at the first subcommittee meeting, you can head over to our negotiated rulemaking website and check out the recording and the transcript of our first session. So at our first meeting, several members discussed concerns with the department's proposal and also presented a counterproposal. We also had support from one member of the subcommittee who has since shared several emails from the community or stakeholders indicating support for the department's initial proposal. So before diving straight into our discussion, I just want to take a pause. Like, remember last time I kind of paused between I just paused, just kind of hear what the subcommittee had to say. So before diving into a deep discussion on the issue paper, I just wanted to allow the subcommittee members to discuss anything that they've heard from their constituencies or the TRIO community at large. And no, it doesn't necessarily have to be the constituency specifically that you represent. It could just be the TRIO community at large that you've heard between the first session and now. So I'll just pause there and kind of open up the floor for just a bit of general discussion.
And while we're in this pause, I would like to welcome Michael Miotti to the table. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning. My apologies. I've been having problems with my Zoom client for the last week or so after a computer reboot. So it took me a couple of cycles to get in, but I'm here.
Yes, you're here. We're happy to have you.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything that you all have heard from your constituency groups or that you'd like to share at this time? And just by way of process, I will encourage you as well. You can utilize the chat box that will be made available to the public at a later time and is visible to the department.
I'll say the programs and directors and staff that I've talked to, I think they kind of have felt the same way that we did. I mean, would we love to welcome these students with open arms? Yes. Are there concerns about the things that we had discussed and brought forward that would happen after the fact of serving these students? It was a pretty common feedback that I got from most of the individuals that I had talked with. So that's kind of where we are, or what I've heard. So.
Thank you, Wade. Aaron?
Oh, you know what? Let's I'll let Michael go first.
Okay, Michael.
Yeah, so it was totally coincidental that I was in the central part of the state of Washington for the last 2 days, central and eastern part of Washington, probably in, political terrain that may be driving some of the concerns that we're hearing from some members of the subcommittee. And I was at a community college, but then also meeting in employment settings that were served by programs in the community college. And the area I was in was a college that had in recent years become an HSI in parts of the state that historically had not been, right? And so, of course, all of the issues that are, discussed are present in location like that. It's similar, I'm sure, to spots around the country. And in the conversations, and I happened to walk right past a large area with Trio, right? Trio Services, like right there is a sign in that college, right? And it's been operating for years. And in talking to the people in that community, and this is outside of the educators, talking with employers in manufacturing and other types of things. And this was the kind of manufacturing facilities, large, could have, I had about 1,000 employees, could take pretty much unskilled people and train them how to do assembly of these complicated devices that they happen to sell. And, I talk to the business people, it's very clear that they understand on the ground the nature of the communities, the realities of who they're serving and what they're doing, and is consistent with my experiences with people at the community level who do not necessarily make their decisions based on the screaming and shouting they hear on national cable news or in governors rushing to certain borders or something like that. And that in service areas like this, the work can be carried on in a way that is inclusive and respectful of everyone that we can help. And while, yeah, there may be cases here and there. I mean, I've looked for examples of which, Gear Up, our programs that are inclusive now, and they are dependent on local and other state funding decisions. So I'm concerned that what we're doing is allowing this national environment that is isolated to certain circles of, media conversation and occasionally performative decision making that does not necessarily reach to the level of what happens in a community level program that meets people where they are. And I think it's probably important for us to make sure that we're clear on the merits first, because, right, I mean, I don't think a group like this is convened in order to do a political assessment of the American environment. That may be a factor that people want to bring in, but first and foremost, as someone who is not a frontline practitioner, right, and is involved in government decision-making processes, I'd want to make sure that we first understand the substantive perspective of people who are frontline practitioners in the appropriateness and the worthiness of being inclusive in the way that the federal government proposes. And then if they have additional thoughts or concerns about politics, then that's maybe something that can be added to it. But I think it's important that we sort of split out the issues that way and consider it to make our communications most clearest to those who will be hopefully listening.
Thank you, Michael. Emmeline?
Yes, hi, thank you. I wanted to ask from the last meeting, I had presented two, I guess, issues that I was concerned with. One was related to the standardized testing objective for upper bound. And the second item was regarding the target school dropout rate for the need criteria for the Talent Search programs. Was there any further consideration or regarding those 2 points, if there's any movement of any kind?
Let's see. We had a chance to review the subcommittee's alternate proposal. There were things in there that included, increases to the upward bound and their stipends, and, a change to the definition of low-income individual, modifications to state testing, and, among the things that you just discussed, Emmeline, and, those areas are likely outside of the scope of what the department announced during the lead up to our main and subcommittee sessions. We did say that we will be discussing issues related to participant eligibility in certain TRIO programs. Some areas we lack statutory authority, but I did mention in our first session that due to other topics of the main committee, they might not have the bandwidth to take on more issues outside of participant eligibility. So, issues related to grantee applications or allowable costs, maybe we could discuss some of those things for something like maybe the Higher Education Program Office could, provide more sub-regulatory guidance and explain things a little better. But in regards to actually changing regulatory requirements, that could be outside the scope. But, this is, we'll talk. I kind of wanted to kind of focus just this portion of the discussion on what you've been hearing from the community, and then we'll dive further into a little bit later, probably sooner rather than later, what in fact you all are going to report out to the main committee. Because based on what I just said, that doesn't prohibit you from presenting those ideas to the main committee. I'm just saying that they're generally outside of the scope of what we announced, and and you also have to think about on the main committee, like I said last time, the main committee is going to be very familiar with issues related to citizenship and non-citizen eligibility, because right now in TRIO, they basically mirror those of Title IV federal student aid. When you get into other issues, more in the weeds issues of the higher education program, TRIO programs, there could be there may be an area of discomfort for the main committee, only because they may not be so familiar. And we're also going to talk about the time that you have to present next week. Well, not next week, at the third session. And trying to expand out to broader issues really is going to be difficult, considering that the main committee still has to discuss, I believe 4 or 5 other issues, probably 5 other issues. Don't quote me on the 4 or 5, but it's 4 or 5 other issues. So that's just something to think about when you're, but we'll talk about that soon. And what I do want to ask you, Emmeline, though, is, have you, Wade and Michael were able to talk about what they've heard? And I do want to circle back to both of them to ask more specific questions about what they've heard. But, have you heard anything between the first subcommittee table and now in the community? Essentially, basically what I've been hearing is there's a lot of support for the change. So, but have you heard anything from your constituency or the community?
Well, I think I'll take this as I see my colleagues have their hands up, so I'll let them speak.
Okay. So yeah, that being said, with the hands being up, we do want to focus right now in the instant case on what you've heard from the community. So you all are going to be addressing what you've heard. Looks like Wade is a no. So if you don't mind, Wade, if you don't mind if I take D'Angelo, since he is addressing what he's heard, and then you can get back in queue. Wade, we'll get you. D'Angelo.
Thank you so much. And again, I want to just thank the department for the consideration and the opportunity to share a perspective. In our state and the state of Texas, there are 2 concerns. One aligns with what we put forward previously, The concern is the possibility of regressive work done as a result of it. And within the state of Texas, there are some activities and actions taken that kind of causes that type of frame of thinking. But the other part also is support, the type of support the Department of Education would hand down with the potential changes. But they also reiterated that whatever the department hands down, TRIO professionals have always been able to do the work. When we were asked to do more with less, we did that. But some of the concerns is salary came up. There is a number of turnover. So there's concern about additional work being done, and yet still having to have one hand tied behind your back, advocating on Capitol Hill for more funding, but also coming to an institution where there lacks support. And so they're in that median, in that middle, where we just want to try to, I guess, address any ambiguity, is that the word? There. And so those are some of the concerns that's been coming from folks in my area that I heard.
All right, thank you, D'Angelo. Did you want to respond directly to that, Aaron, before we?
Oh, well, yeah. So specifically in regards to like the department's proposal, what I know you said like one hand tied behind your back and more work. I mean, with any changes, the department generally releases some regulatory guidance for stakeholders to follow in order, support for like some regulatory guidance in the form of like trying to explain the regulation, explaining how to implement the regulation, and to make it more, I guess, easier to understand. Sometimes I get like when regulations, it's like go here, look at there, go here, look that. But we generally provide those supports to our stakeholders, the TRIO community, in order to explain the changes. So it isn't. We understand how it's written, and we're not too far from the ground. A lot of us are still on the ground. A lot of us are very active on our campuses. It's more so institutional, right? So there are some institutions that safeguard it. There are institutions that say, okay, because the institution is being represented, you're not allowed to reach out to this person or that person. We are the one. We have those who want to reach out to our program offices instead of allowing the person that's the PI to reach out to some of the offices. So when I talk about having to advocate on both fronts, sure, anything that's passed down, we can articulate that, or we understand that. Some of us are very skilled in sharing that information with our institution to say, hey, this is why this is the change. Here's how we intend to formulate that when we can follow those guidelines. Here's some of the things that are not written, some of the things that are experienced on campuses where you have professionals who have to navigate some of that on their own specific campus while addressing the change. And in addition, prepping their staff members who ought to have some level of training in dealing with the population. We cannot have people who are insensitive to the population or have any kind of, attitudes or behaviors, whether knowledgeable or not, dealing with the population as well. So it's more of a broader brush or a broader scope of how some of our folks here are feeling in regards to that, if that makes sense. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, D'Angelo. I know Wade and Jeff, you both had your hands up, and this is in regard to additional feedback. Jeff, did you have some feedback? Wade, do you mind if I go to him first? Okay. Jeff.
Thank you so much. I have heard some more questions about it. Thank you all for letting us be part of this as practitioners. It's great to have our voices and expertise welcomed, and I thank you for that. I'm getting questions from our regional folks, especially EOC. They're wondering, and I put in the chat, just if asylum seekers would be considered part of the undocumented students that they could serve, or is that only for the high school eligible as it pertains to Upward Bound and Talent Search. That's just one of the questions come in. Is this okay, Aaron, to ask about this now? And then another question is, because I'm from Oregon and I worked really hard with our Oregon TRIO Association to get the department's waiver to serve undocumented students. The concern that we have currently serving undocumented students statewide in Upward Bound and Talent Search is that if students are undocumented students are not allowed to receive the stipends, this creates a two-tiered system. Is there any way we could get some answers about, we will still have to have citizenship questions on our applications, so we can discern who not to give the stipends to in our program? Has there been any redress or addressing those questions that have come up that we brought up? I think we touched on that last time. Thank you.
Aaron, are you able to respond?
Yeah, sure. In regards to the first question, asylum seekers, so we talked a little bit in the first session about how the department interprets eligible, like the term eligible non-citizen. So eligible non-citizens include individuals who have asylum. So like an application for asylum wouldn't make someone eligible to participate. But currently, if somebody was granted asylum by the Department of Homeland Security, or granted refugee status, granted if they're a self-petitioner under the Violence Against Women Act, in the law that is called the battered alien, that is a legal term. That is not a term that may be generally used anymore, but that's a legal term in the law. Conditional resident aliens, lawful permanent residents, conditional resident aliens, Cuban Haitian entrants, and individuals that are paroled to the United States for at least 1 year will currently be eligible to participate as as TRIO participants. And that's yeah. So I hope I answered that question. So an individual granted asylum can participate in TRIO now and also receive a grant. And I think that kind of goes into the second part of your question. The idea behind the grants is that the PRORA is the statute that defines qualified aliens. Again, that's another legal term. And so, one second. Hannah, did you want to jump in there? I know we have I don't want to get it totally wrong, but I know we had some talking points on PRORA.
No, I mean, I think everything that you've said is accurate in terms of the individuals who are already eligible to participate in the TRIO programs, irrespective of what we are proposing today. So, you know, there are already a large category of non-citizens, including persons who are granted asylum, who should already be able to participate in, for example, what was asked here, the EOC program, because they are considered qualified aliens under PRORA.
Oh yeah, and I found it. I'm sorry. It's so existing PRORA explicitly prohibits certain types of federal public benefits, in this case, stipends in the form of direct cash, from being awarded to our participants who is not an eligible non-citizen. So that is like a statutory requirement in regard to the stipends.
Okay. Thank you.
I don't know. So I don't know, Crystal. I don't know if Jeff had
did you have any other questions?
I saw you.
Question, Jeff?
No, it just makes it clear that we will still need to ask the citizenship question to discern who is eligible to receive stipends on our applications. Then just the groundwork we're doing, that seems to be clear. We do need to discern who is eligible to receive those funds when we enroll students in our TRIO programs. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Wade, thank you so much for your patience.
Yeah, no problem. I'm glad Jeff asked that because that was one I forgot that our EOC director had asked about, because we actually have a pretty large, again, where we are a population of individuals that are asylum seeking and refugees, with like where we're at, got a very large poultry industry. Tyson, Butterball, all of them are here. And so that was one of the questions, because there are a lot of refugees and asylum seekers here. I would also like to kind of echo what D'Angelo had said. Now, keep in mind, I am no longer working in TRIO, but I had for many, many, many years. And we get the job done. That's when it comes down to it, regardless of whatever regulations, policies are given. We still do what we can to serve our students. And so probably what I would say, and this is, I mean, like I said, the people that I had talked with have some of those same concerns that we talked about in the first session. But again, if this is something that the department is adamant about moving forward on, I think, you know, our goal is to serve as many first generation low income students as we can at the end of the day, and make sure that they have every resource available to them. And we'll do that. It's just, I would say probably that we just want to make sure that we have the support of the department when needs arise and things need to be addressed and maybe changed and adjusted in order to serve all participants, whether it's undocumented or the other participants that we have. I still, and I get it, I know we talked about this last time with the whole stipend issue. That's honestly, that's probably my biggest hang up, because and I understand why. I know it's law, but I really do hate that. And I know that in Michael's emails that he had sent, talked about how programs are resourceful and can find other ways to fund that. I will say, yeah, we do that, but that also does take time away from trying to provide services to students by having fundraising efforts or other things. You know, keep in mind, I'm in a state where it is a lot more restrictive and prohibitive for undocumented students, and so not as supportive typically. And so I just think about obstacles that directors and, you know, program staff would have getting those outside resources in order to try and offset that to make stipends available for undocumented students. So, but.
All right, thank you, Wade. Aaron.
Thank you. Thank you for all the feedback. I appreciate that. So I think we can, you know, we hear you, and we'll move forward into our next discussion. So
If
go ahead.
you don't mind, Michael.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to quickly add it. When I answered the question about things we're hearing, I was focusing very much on the front lines in the state where I live and work. Just adding, of course, you've all seen it, but I have helped share voices of 100+ higher education and K-12 education and other education related organizations and leaders around the country in support of this. So I think there is broad support, particularly in the work. I'm most closely connected to national circles in higher education and university and college leaders beyond whatever else I do, and that's considered to be like state government, you know. And so there does seem to be, as far as I can tell, and based on the record we've put in front of you, broad support from that community, those communities, for this change.
Thank you.
Thank you. All the documents that were forwarded to the department are also on our, I think they should have been forwarded. They probably were forwarded to you all too, but but if you hadn't had a chance to see them, they're also on the negotiated rulemaking website as well. So, I said, that you can several times, even today, that, the subcommittee, this is a subcommittee's proposal to the main committee, and you all can decide to present whatever you choose. So, just keep in mind, also that the department provide consensus or dissent as well. I don't know if did you all get a chance to watch rulemaking last week, the second session? All right. Well, if you didn't, there's a department official as well. His name is Gregory Martin. He also weighs in on consents or not reaching consents. He'd be in a position to decline consent depending on what the subcommittee chose to present to the main committee as well. So even without support of the subcommittee, even without support from the subcommittee, the main committee may still vote on the proposal the department put forward. The overall goal of the subcommittee is to present, one recommendation to the main committee. So it is in the subcommittee's interest to put forward a proposal that everybody's comfortable with. But I also know that there's a difference of opinion in the subcommittee on the recommendation. Therefore, you can present 2, 3, or however many recommendations you all feel if each of you has a different recommendation. The main committee will be able to ask you questions at the third session and ultimately accept or decline consensus. So, with that, based on the feedback we've discussed internally, and you've seen what the second issue paper that we've published. There were no changes from the first subcommittee session. So at this point, we'd like to know what is the recommendation that you'd like to put forward as either a subcommittee, or in the event of disagreements, what are the separate recommendations that you'd like to put forward? I can either stop there and let you all discuss what you're planning to propose to the main committee, or I can talk through the actual time that you'll have to present. Would you want me to stop there and before we get to the actual logistics of the time, or do you want to talk about what you all intend to propose? Or we can talk about, we can revisit the department's proposal. I mean, I can walk through that again. We can talk about that again. It's up to you all.
All right, so committee, you have it. What's your pleasure? We want to revisit the proposal as it is?
I have, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I have a process question, but I'll stop and finish what, sorry, sorry for interrupting. Finish what you need to say, but I have a process question.
Let's take the process question.
Okay.
While we think.
Is it, I've generally been an observer of rulemaking for some time, but never been involved. So I'm curious as to the ability to hold a caucus for members who are interested in being supportive of the proposal but have recommended changes, because where I'm coming from is I understand the general nature of TRIO programs and the issues we're dealing in terms of the eligibility determination, but the conversation around stipends is one that is very new to me. I also though, from the Gear Up perspective and also from financial aid perspective, have some understanding around sensitivities around capturing citizenship status in an actual, recorded sort of way. So, those are things that I think, I don't know whether they're, actually in the scope of what we should be doing, but if they are or could be part of a positive recommendation about the general thrust of the eligibility change, that's what I'd say. That would be an interesting caucus conversation for me if there are others who better understand some of those issues and want to help me understand them and come to a place of being supportive of that as a proposal.
Can I just jump in there really quick, Crystal?
Sure.
I just wanted to, I didn't talk about it earlier, but citizenship is captured in a lot of areas in the Title IV programs outside of, and I hear the concern from Jeff, but, even on the FAFSA, we do capture, the FAFSA asks for the Social Security number, then it asks for the ARN, which is the Alien Registration Number. and there's a match done with the Department of Homeland Security. And if that match has failed, then the schools will see the individual's immigration status in the country and make a determination for their federal student aid based on that. So, I mean, we do capture, I know there, I don't know if the concern was like actually having to ask the question as TRIO programs, but we do capture citizenship in many areas of Title IV aid.
And we do too. That's why I want to better understand what the concern was.
But your question, Michael, is your question about the procedure for calling a caucus, or?
No, well, I guess I'm saying I'd like to have a caucus if there are other members who are interested in having that conversation.
Okay, and are you requesting a caucus then for with anyone that's interested, or would you just like to invite them and we can ask if they'd like to come? What's your
plan? I think it's, I mean, if people are interested in having that conversation, I would like to have that conversation.
Okay. Would anybody be willing to have a brief caucus to speak with Michael about, is it specifically the stipends?
Well, it's the notion of what would a proposal that would be based on general support for the department's proposal, with recommendations around issues that need to be taken into account to be able to do it effectively and help all TRIO participants.
Okay, so that's pretty broad.
Yeah. Do you want me to narrow?
Well, I'm wondering if we're just asking for, and this is just me asking, if there's general support around it, and there's a reason you want to have that specifically in private and not just continue to discuss it here at the table.
And not having been through the process, I don't know the value of the caucus in this setting. I know it. I know it in a legislative setting, having spent many years in a legislative caucus. You know, the value of having a little bit of a conversation to bring people up to speed to get to a comfort level or not. But so. Okay. I would be intrigued. I would be interested if there are people who want to have that conversation and having that conversation. I don't think it would be very long, but
okay. So let's. I'm going to ask who would like to join a caucus with Michael around getting support for the department's proposal as it is. But before I do that, I do want to go to Emmeline just to see if there's something else she wanted to add before we make that consideration. I think Aaron had his hands up. Emmeline?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to, I wanted to just say, I echo what Wade and Jeff had addressed to in terms of the asylum seekers and specifically the stipends. It's just like Wade said, I understand, but when it comes time to implement it at the direct service level with my team and members in my community, it will be it would just be very difficult. And again, I feel that it's a very divisive tool. But in saying that, we did express our concerns and considerations in the papers from the last meeting. We received this, the second document again. The language is the same. So, moving forward, I will support what the department wants, is recommending. I just hope that it will, in the future, the department will continue to provide the same support across all sectors, because the TRIO programs, our main goal is to serve low income and first generation students. So that's my comment. And then if there is time, maybe we could have, if my 3 other colleagues and I maybe could be in a breakout room, just to kind of, maybe give us a few minutes to connect and see where we're in agreement if what we want to do moving forward.
Okay.
Thank you.
And when you say your 3 other colleagues, is it the 3? Which 3 are you asking about? Oh, and you're on mute still, Emmeline.
It's always getting here. Wade, Jeff, and D'Angelo.
Okay. before I ask for the causes, did you have something else that was relevant to the conversation, Wade? Did you want to weigh in
Yeah,
on?
well, I think I want to clarify, whenever they were talking, I think it was Jeff had brought up about on the application about, because I think what Aaron alluded to was the FAFSA, which for that, I mean, I think what Jeff is referring to is on our pre-college applications as they're accepting applications on students. I think that's what he was specifically talking about is we're going to have to include that on there, or is it appropriate to include that on there? Will there be any type of negative impact in including that, by, I don't know. It's a Sue happy world that we live in, So I just want to make sure that we're not, I just want clarification. I think that's what Jeff was kind of alluding to is on those pre-college talent search, upper bound, and EOC, is it appropriate to include a box that they check that they're undocumented?
Okay.
I think, I don't want to get ahead of any sub-regulatory guidance that could be released in regards to it all has to, because there is, there could be, I guess, brainstorming there. It might not necessarily have to be a box that says, are you undocumented, but more, there are so many non-citizens or designations, categories of non-citizen that theoretically you could have a question that says, do you fulfill one of these? Has DHS assigned you one of these designations? Do you have asylum? Are you a refugee? Are you this? Are you that? Are you a self-petitioner under the Violence Against Women Act? Are you Cuban Haitian insurance? As opposed to asking one specific question about a student's undocumented status. So then the student could then potentially be counseled by you in regard to the stipend. So they wouldn't be in a situation where they were checking on a form that they are. It doesn't have to be undocumented. It could be, it could be a U visa holder. Or it could be somebody with temporary protected status. These are all these are all categories that are not. Those are the categories that are not listed in PERORA as qualified aliens. So, so it could be something more like that, like just a exhaustive list. It is exhaustive of qualified aliens in PERORA. So it could be something like that. Does that answer your question, Wade?
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, Michael, I'm sorry. I'm ready to call for your caucus. Did you have something to add before we do that?
Just a question, if we're going to go on if others are going to go on a caucus for that, is it appropriate? I'd like to ask for a caucus, if that's the right term, with department officials while that's other caucuses taking place, to just give me work through some background issues that I need to have better feel for.
Well, we can, and we're gonna call for yours first. You asked for yours first. All right. So
yeah.
At this point, and are you inviting everyone, including the department, Michael?
Yes.
Oh, including me?
Okay.
Yeah. I would say first, I guess it's members of the committee would be first, and then maybe if we went into caucus and we wanted to bring in, I don't know if we can done that. I'm not trying to exclude the department, but it's really a conversation with members of the committees who are interested in moving this forward, but with appropriate additional advice to the full committee.
Okay.
Or at least open to that.
Yes. So that being said, and you think you said not take long, 10, 15 minutes is what you're thinking?
I think maximum, yeah.
Okay. All right. So for a 15-minute caucus, we'll say, please raise your virtual hand if you would like to be placed in a breakout room with around garnering some support, talking through that for the department's recommendation as it stands with Michael. All right, is there anyone interested in a caucus?
I feel like I'm at a 10th grade dance again here.
Okay. And remember, what the caucus does, it will just, it's basically, be a conversation. We stop the live feed. It will be just those in the room, in a breakout room. we'll set it for 15 minutes. If you want to go longer, you can. If it's shorter, you come out and we start again. All right, D'Angelo, looks like you're
Yeah.
ready.
So if I can ask a question, I think it'd be beneficial if my colleagues and I who work out directly with TRIO currently, if we can meet first and then maybe we can join on with Michael, because I think all of us were on the same page previously. And so I think we need to talk through some things together, put our heads around it, because we're so close with working with TRIO programs. That shouldn't take a long time. We don't need 10 minutes. I would say 3 to 5. And then we can cycle back with Michael so we can get our discussions and dialogue. And then we can come back and see, what our findings are. And then we can take a temperature check from there if needed.
Okay, so if no one at this time wants to join Michael in the caucus, Jeff.
Just a clarifying question on, Aaron, what were you asking us to come up with? Just so I can be super clear when we go into our caucus breaks. When we return, what did you want us to have ready and an actionable item for our group?
Well, I mean, I didn't anticipate a caucus, so I don't want to, you all can talk about whatever you want in the caucus, so when you go into them, you discuss, and I did hear Emmeline earlier say there could be potential for support for the proposal, so so that I don't know if others feel that also have that comes that same support as well. But I think the overall deliverable for today is, if you're going to, what you all believe that you're going to present. I know, Emmeline, earlier you discussed the alternative proposal that you presented last time. So that if you want to present that, Emmeline, you can present that to the main committee. You can absolutely do that, if D'Angelo, Wade, Jeff, you all want to present that as a group to the main committee, you can present that. If Michael, you can come to the main committee with something else as well. But the idea behind the subcommittee is to have one proposal to bring to the main committee so that they can take it, talk about it, maybe fine tune it a little bit, and weigh in on consensus. But that does not mean that you are required to present one single recommendation to the main committee. You can, so that's the deliverable for today, just to get an idea of what you all are going to present to the main committee, and also talk to you all about the time you'll have. So you'll have you'll have about an hour to present. So, if it's 2 opposing proposals, you'll each have 30 minutes. If it's 3 proposals, you have 20 minutes. If it's 5 proposals, you have 10 minutes each. But that's essentially what the deliverable is. But the subcommittee, the caucus is open to whatever you want to discuss.
Perfect.
Thank you, Aaron, for those logistics. Before we caucus, Cindy.
Yeah, I just want to clarify here, D'Angelo and Emmeline, your thought is that the 3 active practitioners, right, for the TRIO programs would meet briefly, and then actually the 4 of you, and then after that, then you would bring Michael in, or entertain bringing Michael in to have that overall general discussion of where you want to go. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, all right.
Okay. At that time, too, just for time's sake, Michael mentioned the opportunity also to caucus with the department. We could do that at the same time. So the 4 of them asked for about 5 minutes. We could put you in a room with the department, Michael, and if you take longer, that's okay. We'll just.
I doubt we will, but that would be good. Yeah.
Okay. So we are going to do that. We're going to call a 5-minute caucus. So we'll come back at about 10:55 Eastern. You'll get an invite to a breakout room. If you all need help, there is a request for help button, I believe. Give me one moment to get that set up.
Are you doing it, Crystal?
I am.
Okay. I'll stay out of it.
Sorry. All right. Michael, who would you like from the department besides Aaron?
And it's their choice.
Okay. Aaron,
But can you invite Gregory Martin? Oh, sorry. Sorry. Aaron, me, Aaron, Gabby, and Hannah.
okay. Aaron. All right, you all are going to 7, Gaby, and Hannah. All right, you all should have your request. Looks like. Oh, you have yours, Aaron? You may have to press the breakout button.
Oh, okay. Let me see. All right. Join
Okay,
breakout.
7. Room 7.
Room 7?
You see that?
Don't.
All right, hold on. Let me do it again.
Uh-oh. Is the public looking at my technological skills here? Okay, here we go. All right, joining.
All right.
Can we pause the live feed, please?
All right. Welcome back. Thank you, everyone. So we are now everyone's back at the table. And we wanted to start just to see if anyone had a report out from either of the caucuses that took place.
I do.
Okay, D'Angelo.
I want to thank the colleagues for coming together, having a conversation. Within our conversation, what was stated was we expressed our concerns. We have expressed our concerns during our last meeting, and we understand that the department is going to move forward with the recommendations to include undocumented students that's eligible for TRIO. That's something that we can support. However, since we are focusing on the NED reg on participants eligibility, we want to uplift the eligibility focus proposed rule change to include Pell eligibility, especially now with the issues with the better FAFSA. This will be an incredible, helpful change for TRIO programs.
Okay. Mike, thank you, D'Angelo. Was there a report out from the other caucus or anything else that the other caucus would like to share?
No, not from the caucus I asked for, no.
Okay. Okay. All right, Aaron?
So I guess we can move forward into what exactly you all are going to be reporting to the, well, you don't have to tell us exactly what you're going to be reporting to the main committee. I mean, but if you have a general idea of what you will be saying to the main committee, that would be helpful for the department. I think the public is all to hear. So, D'Angelo, what, what would be your recommendation to the subcommittee? I mean, sorry, I apologize. What would be your recommendation to the main committee?
We would, based on what is written in the documents, we can support that. If there is any opportunity for Pell eligibility to be considered, we would like that to be considered. And and we can also seek further guidance on what that could potentially look like, because it'd be extremely helpful for our students, our programs, our SSS programs and McNair programs specifically. What I would like to do is possibly, if I can, provide some additional language that my counterparts would like to add to that, but that's something that, based on our discussion, but in general, we're going to go ahead and support what the department is putting out. So as far as the language part, that's what I have for the moment. But if you need something specific, if something other than that needs to be written down or presented, I'm happy to provide that.
No, I don't. It doesn't have to be specific. I just, thank you for that clarification. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, so just to be clear, I'll step in here, Aaron. So just to be clear, the four of you, all that last session, were not in support of the language, the red line text. You are in support now. You would recommend the changes as the department has presented them. Is that correct?
We will provide support for it. Our TRIO programs. We're prepared to do the work that the department is recommending.
Okay. All right. So in that case, then, Michael had already expressed his support for the language. So we then would have, and I know Aaron, the department supports its language. So we would be in support of the language as it's written. Everyone. Okay. So I do think the next step, as Cindy?
Oh, go ahead.
So I do think the next step is to discuss the logistics of the report. If it's just you all are going to put a report, I know that D'Angelo will be there and can express verbally the support for the language as written. We could see who else, if anyone else wanted to be there as well to answer any questions. Cindy?
Yeah, I just have a clarifying question here, Crystal. D'Angelo, you know, I heard you say that the subcommittee is in support of the department's proposal, which is wonderful. I'm glad you were able to, you know, find your way there. But I believe I heard you mention that if possible, you would like to include Pell Grant.
Yes.
Did you want to have discussion on that?
I'd love to discuss it with the department if we can have, if they can give any feedback on that process or the possibilities of that consideration, and what authority they have to potentially make those changes. I know it was a previous preference about the focus and on what was written specifically, but if there's any insight into what the department or what the department can do to make that change or addition, we're all ears for that as well.
Aaron?
I think you're talking about Pell eligibility in relation to the definition of a low-income individual, right, D'Angelo?
Yes, sir.
I want to allow Hannah to talk to statutory definitions. Or you know, I don't want to put Hannah on the spot, but if we might have to take that back. Okay.
No, yeah, I'm good. So the definition of how one documents the status of being a low-income individual is provided specifically in statute. If helpful, I could drop that definition into the chat box, but I do think that's an area, unfortunately, where Congress has said specifically what we can consider as documentation of status as a low-income individual, and they haven't provided evidence of Pell Grant receipt as a way that we can meet that documentation. So I think we are restricted by the statutory language there. I can drop it into the chat if that's helpful.
That's going to be helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Wait.
But isn't one of the things I know for like for SSS and maybe D'Angelo, because again, I ran several programs. SSS was not one of those. Was an ICER or like from their having that, wasn't that something that you could document to show their income eligibility for a student in SSS, D'Angelo?
Yeah, I believe that, but don't quote me on that one. I have two SSS programs here on site, and some of the challenges that they expressed to me was the ability to identify, and if Pell eligibility was something that can be added, it would help them tremendously.
Well, my understanding is with the quote unquote better FAFSA, programs aren't able to access that through their financial aid offices, right, or won't be able to. So it's going to be a lot harder for programs to get necessary documentation in order to determine who's eligible. So if we had, I think if students were able to present their, their confirmation page showing their EFC, then to show that they are in fact Pell eligible, then that would make it a lot easier for programs and for students to get services to them, I think is kind of what.
Aaron.
You know, outside of the context of, actually changing regulations, we also have a lot of tools in the form of sub-regulatory guidance. I apologize. I know you probably all know what sub-regulatory guidance is. This is probably mainly for the public, just so that we all can be on the same page. The department quite often releases sub-regulatory guidance in the form of letters or announcements to explain statutory regulatory provisions. And I'm just wondering, you know, would that be based on what Hannah says, you know, being not being able to change the definition of a low-income individual, like through negotiated rulemaking, could it help for the department to provide just a little more guidance about what the statutory requirements around the definition of a low-income individual is? That does not mean that we would say that we would include Pell eligibility in that, but just to provide more guidance about the current definition and how it should be implemented. Could that be something that could help in lieu of, you know, our prohibition on rulemaking?
D'Angelo Wade, or would that be? And you all are on mute. It looks like you all are mulling it over.
All I said was D'Angelo. I was just going to defer to him.
Okay. And you said something. We can't hear you, D'Angelo. You're off mute, but we can't hear you. Okay, there you are.
I was thinking it through. I think that would be helpful, but I would hope that there can be some type of segue into into hopefully making additional changes if possible, whether we take the advocacy to those who can make things happen and change there. But I think that'll be helpful. And thank you, Aaron, for that.
Now I'm on mute. As Cindy said, I do. Oh, Aaron, go ahead.
You go first. I'm sorry.
Okay. Well, I was just going to congratulate the members of the subcommittee for coming together with a recommendation, a single recommendation. So we still have some time, and we can just come together on what that looks like, so that we're prepared. As Aaron has alluded to, and for those that did watch the session, there are a lot of topics still left on the table. So it sounds like there has been a finite amount of time allocated to the TRIO committee subcommittee report out. So if we can get that as cogent as possible, I think that would really help the committee in the long run. Aaron.
You know, I was going to talk about the logistics of the report out. So I guess, Michael, if you have a question, maybe Crystal, if you want mine, you go first.
Yeah, let me make sure. Okay, I'm off mute. Okay, good. Just curious, in terms of the recommendation, I want to make sure that I understand what the recommendation is, that the recommendation is support for the department's proposal, and there are other issues or matters being suggested for consideration. Obviously, if they're defined by statute, we can't, the rules process can't address that. But understanding that that's what the proposal is, support and think about these other things, as opposed to that's one big thing that if you can't do the whole thing, you shouldn't be doing any of it.
That's a good clarification. D'Angelo, can you weigh in on that? Are you making the support for the recommendation as is, for the proposal as is, contingent on anything else?
As is.
Wait, say that again?
Okay, yeah.
So yeah, it isn't hindered upon whether the department, I think it's understandable that with the Pell grant or the Pell eligibility, there are challenges there, or there's a statute in place. So it isn't hinged upon that. If the department is going to move forward with it, TRIO programs will prepare to do the work.
Okay.
Okay, I'm sorry. You said it is not.
It is a little hard to hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is it me?
Yeah. So
I'm sorry.
let
me go look. It's not hinged upon that. No, it's not hinged upon.
All right. Understood. All right. Like I said, D'Angelo, you can discuss, you can talk about your like what you would like to see happen in the future at the main committee as well. But again, like as Crystal said, we're really excited about the subcommittee support for the proposal. Crystal, can I go into the logistics, or
Yes,
y'all ready to
let's-
go into some logistics for third
Let's talk
session?
logistics, see what it
Oh.
looks like.
All right. So we'll have about an hour to present to the main committee. We might not need that much time, because there's one proposal with maybe some other discussion items. So you don't have to take the entire time, but the main committee will be able to ask you questions about what happened at the subcommittee, and you'll be able to respond, to those questions. Then the main committee will take a consensus check, and kind of like we did here. Crystal can explain how it will look, and if the main committee reaches consensus. So I don't know if I said that, but so you'll have an hour to present, and then the main committee will have an hour to ask questions. So it'll be 2 hours total. And then if the main committee reaches consensus on the subcommittee's recommendation, then that's what we will publish as a proposed rule. So the public will then be able to comment further on the proposed rule. After that, we'll publish a final rule that will take effect the following year, July 1st of the following year that the regulation is published.
Yeah.
So, did somebody want to say something?
No, I can just step in just to be clear. So the consensus means that every member of the committee has to accept. If there is one person that is not in favor, then the committee does not have consensus. So as we explained before, you all's job, and you all have done a good job as subject matter experts, specifically in these TRIO programs, is to give them as much information so that they can make an informed decision. It probably bodes well that all of you all agree on one recommendation. So you just want to present that, be available to answer those questions. But ultimately, after that, it's completely in the hands of the committee. Aaron, go ahead, sorry.
So like I said at the first, table, you all can present out, how you choose. It could be a, PowerPoint presentation. It could be, I remember, it can be, I guess, an essay format. You don't have to create a presentation. You can just say we support the department's language, and that can be it. But it just depends on how you all want to present out, that report. And it's not, and we wouldn't need it until February 23rd. So obviously the sooner the better, for sure. But you can take some time to decide as a subcommittee how you all want to present. And any ideas who would want to do it? Do multiple people want to come, or? That's for you all.
Well, we know that D'Angelo will already be there.
D'Angelo's going to be there. D'Angelo can do it by himself. He can do it by himself. He can have some support from you all.
Michael.
Yeah, I'd love to be there, whether or not I actually have to say it, maybe mostly for answering questions or something like that, but I would love to be there I keep wanting to say the verb participate, but that may not happen verbal participation may not happen unless needed if D'Angelo is going to give the main recommendation, but I would like to be available, be in the digital room, let's put it that way.
Okay. And so D'Angelo, we are assuming that you will make the report out, is that correct? All right, looks like that's a yes.
That is correct.
Okay, cool. All right, cool. So it sounds like it'll be D'Angelo and Michael that will present out, and D'Angelo present out, and then Michael and D'Angelo will answer questions. Sounds good. Yeah. So D'Angelo and Michael, y'all will get together and let the department know, well, actually FMCS, you can send however you decide to report out, you can send that to FMCS by the 23rd. Is that okay? Cool. Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
All right. And just in case, you all just let FMCS know, just email myself or Cindy if you would like the link to, be on camera on the date. We don't know what date yet, correct, Aaron, that the report will be made?
No, we don't. Not yet. I don't know if this. Give me 1 second.
Well, okay. But I mean, we'll let you all know and just let us know. Right now, we will be prepared to send invites to Michael and D'Angelo. If you would like to be there, let us know. Of course, you all are welcome to watch it on the public link at any time if you don't want to be in the room.
Yeah, so it'll be sometime between March 4th and March 7th. So D'Angelo, you're already going to be there, so you'll be available. Michael, hopefully you can be flexible between those dates for a 2-hour space between
it's
10 p.m. and 10 a.m. and
10 to 12.
Okay.
And then 1 to,
Okay.
I guess it would have to start before.
Maybe like 1 to 3. So
Yeah.
10 to 12 and 1 to 3 Eastern time.
3:30 Eastern.
Yeah. March 4th through the 7th.
Okay. All right. I believe. So is there anything else that this committee would like to discuss? We have 25 minutes until lunch. We are scheduled for another until 3 after lunch. Is there anything else that the committee would like to bring to the table? Right now, we have marked that we have a recommendation, a single recommendations in support of the department's language. Anything additional? Okay. Cindy, am I missing anything? Aaron, did you want to add any other statement?
I don't have a prepared thank you for you all. I should have probably written something down. Thank you so much for, joining with us to discuss the issue. And, we're really happy that we were able to come to one recommendation for the main committee. And if you all have any other further questions, you can always email FMCS and they will get it to the appropriate folks at the department. And again, thank you so much for taking this time out. And thank you for the work that you do in the community. I guess I can go. I'm not accepting an Oscar. I don't know why I'm thinking of who the thank you I could give. I don't know. But anyways, does anybody from the subcommittee want to say anything? I don't want to just.
Okay. I am getting some other folks that want to come. Jeff and then Emmeline looks like.
Thank you. I put it in the chat, but I'd like to be there to support our process with the full committee too.
Okay, we'll send that link out. Emmeline, did you have something as well?
Well, I guess just a point of clarification, if it seems, as you have stated, that because our committees we're moving forward with the proposed recommendation by the Department of Ed, do we need to meet again after?
No, do you mean like the rest of today, Emmeline?
Yeah, I mean,
no,
because we've come to.
Yeah, no, if the committee has concluded and come to their one recommendation and it is stated on the record of what that recommendation is, you will have bought back about 4 hours worth of your time for today.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Yes, that's true. I'm ready to call for an adjournment. Just remember that it is still incumbent on you all that want to review the document that you will send by February 23rd. That will that will encompass the recommendation. So do work with D'Angelo. We know he's leading the report out. If you need additional space to talk or discuss anything, just reach out to FMCS. We can make one available to you. But if there is nothing else, subcommittee, Federal Trio Subcommittee 2024, we will adjourn this meeting at 11:38 Eastern. Thank you all so much for your coming together on it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Congratulations, everyone.
Thank you.
Great meeting you, Aaron. Thanks for the facilitators. Nice working with everyone.
Yes, and thank you, Aaron, for leading us through this.